It was just past noon in Broughton, Mississippi. The heat hadn't yet settled into the cracks of the old town, but the tension had inside the modest diner. Ceiling fans spun lazily above tables of regulars and their quiet routines until she walked in. A tall black woman, sharp suit under a light jacket, no company, no visible badge, just a small leather folder tucked beneath one arm, and a look that made people hesitate. Elise Rowe took her seat in the corner, ordered a Cobb salad, and opened the folder. Paper rustled softly, names, dates, times, the kind of documents that don't belong in plain sight, unless you want someone to notice. She wasn't there to hide. But she also wasn't expecting him. Officer Jared Flint, 29, third generation brought PD, stepped into the diner after a noise complaint call that turned out to be a couple of kids laughing too loud in a parking lot. He needed coffee. What he saw instead was what he'd been trained unofficially to interpret as unusual. A black woman alone watching, writing, reading. He squinted, adjusted his duty belt, and made a decision. She didn't look up when he approached. She was used to this part. "You waiting for someone, ma'am?" His voice was civil, but tilted with presumption. She looked up slowly. "No, just having lunch." He nodded, then leaned slightly closer, noticing the document sticking halfway from her folder and emblem. Faded, but unmistakable federal investigation. His eyes narrowed. "You work for the feds." She didn't answer. He took that as resistance. "I've had folks come in here pretending to be all kinds of things. Next thing you know, they're live streaming, screaming about rights and threats. It's a dangerous time to be wearing the wrong uniform, even if it's pretend." Her reply was calm, controlled. "I'm not wearing a uniform, but you're carrying federal material. You saw a seal on a document. That's not a crime." He stepped back just enough to tap his shoulder. "Mike Unit 3 requesting backup to the diner. Possible fraudulent ID. Subject possibly recording or inciting." She closed the folder slowly. "You're making a mistake." The manager glanced over nervously. A white couple 2 booths over shifted in their seats. One of them muttered, "She does look out of place." Flint pointed. "See, it's not just me." Elise stared at him now, not blinking. "Your gut isn't the law, and your suspicion isn't probable cause." He grinned. "You going to lawyer me now?" She reached slowly into her jacket, pulled out a thin badge wallet, opened it, but not wide enough for the rest of the diner to see. Just for him, the real thing. Flint's eyes widened, a beat of silence. Then she spoke, not loudly based, but with a precision that cut through the heat of the moment. "I'm here on official federal assignment, and the man I came to see is your police chief." The silence around them was immediate. Flint opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Elise closed her badge, laid it flat on the table, and said evenly, "You just called for backup on the woman sent to arrest your boss." Broughton, Mississippi looked like one of those towns where nothing ever really happened. Main Street still had hand-painted signs. Church bells rang on Sundays. People knew each other's dogs by name. But under all that quiet charm, there was a rot no one dared speak about. Complaints were dismissed. Cameras mysteriously stopped working. And when a young black man went missing 2 summers ago, it was chalked up to drugs and bad company. Case closed in 48 hours. Elise Rowe had been watching Broughton for 6 months quietly, methodically. She didn't work from a desk. Her job was to go where things got buried and dig them back up. She had already uncovered a string of internal complaints against the Broughton Police Department: racial profiling, intimidation tactics, unexplained injuries during arrests. Nothing stuck because someone upstairs always cleaned it up before it reached a courtroom. That someone had a name: Chief Dale Crum. Crum was old school. Military background, spotless record, at least on paper. He preached discipline, loyalty, and knowing your town. To the local press, he was a model public servant. To the people of color in Broughton, he was a shadow you didn't talk back to. The badge didn't just protect him, it made him untouchable. That was about to change. Elise wasn't there to stir chaos. She came for answers, and she played by the book until the book stopped protecting the people it was meant to serve. Her investigation had grown quietly like roots under pavement. A mother whose son was accidentally tossed in his own driveway. A former officer who quit after finding his body cam footage mysteriously deleted. A store owner whose calls for help were ignored after refusing to give discounts to cops. All stories alone meant nothing. Together, they painted a picture, and Elise was there to frame it clearly. She didn't wear her badge on her chest. She didn't shout. That's what made her dangerous. She had learned early in her career that justice doesn't come when you raise your voice. It comes when you prepare so well they can't outrun the truth. That's why she'd chosen the diner. Public enough for safety, quiet enough for a conversation. She was supposed to meet her final source there, a young dispatcher who had agreed to turn over internal texts. But instead she met Flint. Jared Flint wasn't the devil, but he was exactly what the system wanted. Obedient, confident, and uninterested in asking questions. His father had worn the uniform. So had his grandfather. And Jared had learned the same silent code. Don't snitch. Don't doubt the badge. And always treat the outsider like a threat. So when he saw Elise, alone, composed and unreadable, his instinct wasn't curiosity. It was control. Elise had seen the pattern before. Men like him didn't see people like her as citizens. They saw them as risk. And risk needed to be neutralized, not understood. Still, Elise had held her ground. She let Flint walk himself into a trap, not with aggression, but with arrogance. Every word he'd said, every move was recorded, streamed live to a secure federal server. She hadn't come unprotected. And when he called for backup, he didn't realize the weight of what he just triggered. Now the trap was set. All that was left was for the spider to walk in. Officer Flint stood stiff, hand hovering near his belt, trying to make sense of what he'd just seen. Elise's badge, real, federally issued, rested quietly on the table like a loaded weapon. But it wasn't just the badge that shook him. It was the calm in her voice, the authority in her silence. It didn't match what he'd been trained to fear, and that made it worse. Still, he didn't back down. If that's real, he said, voice tightening, why would someone like you be eating lunch here alone with no backup? Elise didn't blink. Because I don't need backup to eat. Flint reached for his radio again. Unit 3 to base. I need immediate confirmation. Possible impersonation of federal personnel. But Elise leaned forward, voice steady. That call is being logged. Officer Flint, right now you're misidentifying a federal investigator and interfering with a classified operation. I strongly suggest you take a step back before you write your name into a felony. The tension in the diner grew like rising smoke. Customers froze. The waitress retreated to the kitchen. No one moved. Flint's pride was now on trial, and Elise was the quiet, unstoppable prosecution. You think I'm scared of your paperwork, he snapped. No, Elise replied, eyes fixed on him. I think you're scared of not being in control. Back at the station, Chief Dale Crum ended a call, took a sip of lukewarm coffee and muttered, You've got to be kidding me. Jared's voice had sounded rattled, like a rookie on his first real stop. A black woman claiming to be with the feds in his town. Crum didn't bother calling anyone. He just grabbed his keys and headed straight to the diner. He knew how to handle people who didn't belong. When he arrived, the air was thick. Elise stood calmly at her table. Flint by her side, confused and angry. Crum entered like he owned the building, shoulders squared, jaw set. Which one of you thinks you're federal? He asked, voice low and laced with sarcasm. Elise didn't raise her voice. She just pulled a document from her folder and handed it to him. I don't think I'm federal. And this is your copy. Crum glanced down, eyes narrowing. It was a subpoena signed by a federal judge attached to a sealed indictment. What the hell is this? The end of your cover, Elise said. Then she pulled out her second file, this one thick, marked confidential. She began listing unauthorized wiretaps on civilian phones, 2 unreported stops involving minors, internal body cam footage deleted from server logs, payments made from an untraceable fund to intimidate witnesses. Shall I continue? Crumb's face shifted. You've got nothing. She flipped to the next page. Testimony from your former deputy. Bank records showing off-book transfers. Texts between you and known criminal intermediaries. The room went silent, not from fear but recognition. Elise laid out the final piece. Laws violated include obstruction of justice, witness tampering, misuse of public funds, and civil rights violations. The Department of Justice has already confirmed jurisdiction. She pulled out the last envelope, a printed arrest warrant, federally sealed. Dale Crum, you are under arrest. Crum laughed. Short and cruel. In this town, do you really think that's going to hold? You think I'm going to walk out of here in cuffs because some desk girl brought a file folder? Elise didn't flinch. You won't be walking anywhere. Behind her, a man stepped through the diner door. U.S. Marshal's badge flashing. Another followed. Then another. This is a federal operation. You are in our custody. The first one said, confidence cracked. He looked around. The waitress was filming. So was the teenager by the door. Even the couple who earlier backed Flint now sat silent watching. Crumb's hands twitched near his belt, but the marshals were faster. He was face down on the floor in seconds, hands zip-tied, ego shattered. Flint stood frozen. Elise turned to him. You called for backup, officer. Congratulations. It came. Once Crum was in custody, the shock still lingered in the air like the tail end of a storm. The marshals moved swiftly, securing the scene, collecting the files Elise had prepared with surgical precision. But this wasn't over. Not yet. The arrest had only cracked the surface. What lay beneath was the real battle, a system that had been shielding itself for years, now exposed. At headquarters, Officer Flint sat in an empty conference room, a thousand-why stare in his eyes. Elisa entered quietly, her demeanor unchanged. No gloating, no anger, just resolve. We're not here to destroy people, Officer Flint. We're here to dismantle patterns. That starts with truth. He scoffed, arms crossed. But the facade was crumbling. So that's it. You just walk in, flip the town upside down, and expect us to admit we were part of it. Elise leaned against the wall. I don't need you to admit anything. I need you to remember everything. That's when she slid a file across the table. Inside were records, incident reports Flint had signed, body cam logs that mysteriously disappeared right after his shift ended, civilian complaints that were dismissed before being read. At first, he denied it all. But then Elise played the clip. A grainy audio file, his voice, a 14-year-old boy. Stop resisting. I'm not, sir. Swear. Thud. Silence. Flint's breath caught. He tried to speak, but the words refused. You didn't mean to hurt him, Elise said quietly. But you didn't report it either. And now he's out there thinking he's the one who did something wrong. That's when the shift happened. Not with shouting, not with threats. Just a mirror held up at the right angle. Flint looked down, his voice barely audible. What do you want from me? I want you to talk, she said. Not to save yourself, but because you were inside the circle. You know how it operated. And someone has to break it. He nodded slowly, not because he trusted her, but because for the first time he couldn't trust the silence anymore. Flint agreed to cooperate. What he revealed made Elise's investigation look small by comparison. Officers were instructed to patrol certain streets more aggressively, not for safety, but to generate fines and build records. Internal affairs reports were routed to a private inbox controlled by Byram himself. Promotions weren't based on service, but silence. If you raised concerns, your next shift was scheduled in the part of town with the highest call volume and no backup. This wasn't negligence, it was a structure. With Flint's statement and Elise's evidence, the case exploded onto the national scene. Media vans showed up within a day. Civil rights attorneys flew in. Federal oversight committees demanded access. Broughton wasn't a quiet town anymore. It had become a spotlight. And under that light, the truth no longer had shadows to hide in. But Elise didn't stay for the interviews. She had what she came for: a breach in the armor and a witness from within. She left the rest to the courts and to the people. Elise didn't say much on the way out of Broughton. She never did. The town she left behind was no longer the same place she had walked into a week ago. Doors that had always stayed shut were now opening. People who used to whisper were starting to speak. The badge that once protected the wrong people was finally being questioned. And though the cameras had come and gone, the story had only just begun for them. She didn't wait for credit. Her name wouldn't be in the headlines. That was never the point. Justice to Elise wasn't about attention. It was about air. People deserved to breathe without fear. They deserved to walk home without a patrol car slowing down just because of how they looked. They deserved silence without suspicion. Before she boarded the train, Flint found her one last time. He wasn't in uniform, no badge. Just a man who looked like he'd finally stopped rehearsing his excuses. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said quietly. Elise didn't flinch. "Don't say it to me," she replied. "Say it to the next person who's afraid to walk into a diner alone. Say it with your actions. Say it when no one else is looking." He nodded slowly. "Do you think I can fix any of this?" He paused. "No one fixes it alone, but you can stop it from growing." Then she stepped onto the train, took her seat, and opened a blank page in her worn leather notebook. At the top she wrote, "Case closed." Then below that she added one more line. Softer, more personal. Sometimes the most dangerous threat is the silence we've all learned to live with. The train pulled away from the platform. The town disappeared behind trees. But the look she left behind, the look she gave Crumb and Flint and everyone who watched her stand her ground stayed. And it would. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.